So it's always a long exit on the video. I need to figure out, I need to trim that so that it's not like that. So anyways, welcome everyone to the Lazy Lab podcast. We're here on episode 9. The Doc is In is the name of the episode. So if you're following along in your car or something like that and you're not watching on YouTube, no big deal. However, it is a more digestible format to go over to YouTube and just watch it. Hit the subscribe button, hit the like button, whatever format you're on, whatever they have for making sure that you follow along with us as we release new content. Go ahead and give that a shot. Now, we are also brought to you by Ubora Coffee Roasters, providing the caffeine for the hunts and all our media content. So check out Ubora Coffee Roasters, also on YouTube. It's down in the corner, wrong way, that way. There we go. I'm still trying to use that. So with me today is a friend of the show, a friend of the organization, someone who I had on the Vet Pivot podcast not too long ago, is Dr. Shauna Springer. So, Doc, how are you? How are things?
Things are great. It's good to be here, Matt. It was fun to come on that podcast and excited to do another one with you.
Yes, last time we talked, we had Dynamite Dave Cascante with us and really
Right.
cool dialogue between, former patient doctor relationship, which was unique. You don't really get
Yeah.
that perspective in a in life. So very, very cool to see that play out for me anyways. I'm sure it was very unique for you as well.
It was. I mean, I've never done that before. To have, patients contact me out of the blue is pretty normal, but to have a successful co-host of a podcast say, "Will you come on to Vet Pivot podcast and talk about our therapy relationship?" was really different. And I know that, we see this on HBO, like In Treatment, and it's kind of scripted in a lot of Hollywood movies, but like this was like raw and like, what did you think? Like, when did you first start to trust me? And like, it was very interesting and really valuable and innovative. So very
Yeah,
cool.
there. Yeah, I had a ton of fun with that, and I thought that just the connection that you had built with Dave in that time since therapy. I mean, it's pretty cool that it has lasted as long as it has, and that he got to a place where he was able to extend that invitation, and share that with the audience, with the world. Um, you just came back from you were in a remote part of Oregon. I know we were going to talk last week, but we postponed so we get you back in your nice setting that you have there. It's a really nice podcast background. So, how was Oregon? Was it relaxing? Was it? Did you
It was
escape?
amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was amazing. I went to go and visit a friend of mine who is just one of my favorite people. He's Carl Marlantis, who wrote some amazing books, Matterhorn. I mean, it's like, I just hard to describe. I think is the definitive novel of the Vietnam War. And then he wrote, it's actually right next to me because I just unpacked What It Is Like to Go to War.
Yeah.
But actually, have you read that, Matt?
I have not read that, but I have read Matterhorn, though it's been quite some time since I had, and a lot of books in between since I've read it. So it's worth going back and reading again.
Yeah, but he's actually didn't plan on doing this, but it's right next to my thing. He's actually really focused on his novel, Deep River, that he just brought out. And it's really a fascinating history of the area. Carl can write. I mean, it's just so
Yeah.
good. It just transports you. And so what was really neat was going up there and having him take my family and I around to all the places that he grew up, where the novel was set, talking about the backstories. And so it was just, it was an unbelievable week that I will always
What
remember for the
a
rest of my life.
that's such a cool way to experience a novel too, right? So like as you're reading it,
Yeah.
you have like the author's insight and perspective
Yep.
and the research that went into creating the characters and the landscapes that
Mhm.
they're interacting in. That's neat. That's very, very neat. Not a lot of people
Yeah.
get that.
No, I haven't ever done that before. It was amazing. So,
That's
yeah.
awesome. So obviously we're bringing on the show. It's the Lazy Lab podcast, and Matt Mitchelson, and
Mhm.
we've
Yep.
how do you know the organization? I guess I'll start there, and we'll just kind of build on it.
Actually, Dynamite Dave introduced me to Matt, and he said, he's a good man. You'll like him. And that was kind of all I needed because I know that Dave knows I really like to align with people who are doing great work for the tribe. And so I learned about the work of Lazy Lab. And actually, one of the funnest parts of this last horrible year and a half for all of us, but there have been some highlights. And one of them was Matt Mitchelson called me up and he said, "Hey, do you know anybody that would benefit from having a service dog?" And
Yeah.
I of course I do, there's so many. And so he said, "I'm gonna allow you to provide through Lazy Lab Hunting Club, which is the sponsor and donor of these, this opportunity to have a service dog trained by Freedom Service Dogs of America out of Colorado that they partner with for 10 veterans." I had so much fun doing that, making those
That's
calls. It was
awesome.
telling them about the value of service dogs and getting them to link up with that support. It was so much fun.
Ah, it's great. So tell us a little bit about like who are some of the veterans that you were able to serve with these service dogs, and did you get to partner with FSD with Freedom Service Dogs of America, or like how did that relationship play out? Because that it's so fascinating to me the way that the partnership between the two organizations works, and how we're
Yeah,
able to provide our outdoor therapy. But there's also this like extension of that, in that once you come to a Lazy Lab organization event
yeah,
or get introduced to us through whatever channel, it doesn't just
yeah,
stop. It's not like, hey, we do this one thing and then we're done.
yeah.
There's like constant follow-up.
Right. So it's, you're creating a tribe, right? And you're finding other organizations that can play a part in equipping and supporting and resourcing your tribe. And so Freedom Service Dogs of America, I talked to Matt about them and talked about how they fly the veteran out and they co-train with the dog. And it's just a really neat program.
Yeah.
I've worked with a number of different service dog organizations. I actually wrote an article for CNN about how service dogs can protect us, can help us to grow in certain ways, and it can even save us from ourselves. And so I've seen a number of different organizations, but there are ones that really take this mission very seriously and really
Yeah.
give a good in-depth training program that realizes that the human is as important as the canine in that bond, and fostering that and training them together is so critical. So I really like that about their program.
What is it about service dogs that work as like a therapeutic presence in your life constantly? Is it the codependence, like I'm accountable to this thing and it feels accountable to me? Is that what drives that therapy, or what's the trigger there?
Yeah, for some people, right? Because especially thinking about veterans and first responders, who are protectors by nature, won't
Yeah,
do a lot of things for themselves. But the minute it's like, oh, well, no, you've got to get out of bed because your dog is counting on you, that can certainly change the whole equation. Um,
that makes
I
sense.
think it,
Yeah.
yeah, it varies though. I mean, it's been eye-opening to me to learn
Yeah.
about service dogs. And one of the articles I talked about in the CNN, or one of the stories I talked about in that CNN piece, was actually about my friend John, who has a rare Stevens-Johnson syndrome is what it's called. It's a rare immune disorder, and it can get really bad really fast. And he is an international TED speaker, like on the big
Huh.
stage. And so he has this service dog who just passed this year, but Flash is his like buddy and has been for years. And like other service dogs, Flash is working all the time. It's
All the
not
time. Yeah.
emotional support. It's Flash is there to smell when John's body chemistry changes,
Yeah.
and he can smell it with his nose and then do something called alerting so that John will realize it, go take a nap, go take his medication, and avert what could be like a really serious health consequence.
Wow.
So it's very different, than just kind of the emotional support animal. And I understand that better now after this year.
Yeah, that's an interesting insight, because a lot of people will like just out of ignorance and not know, you just don't know. And
Yeah.
so people, well, what's the difference between an emotional support animal and a service dog? It's, well, there's actually like the training. You can't just go train a dog yourself to do that. I mean, there's a lot of work that goes into creating a service animal to the like specific training needs, like a service animal for someone who is visually impaired is not going to
Hmm.
have the same training as a service animal for someone who is, you know, maybe they're missing a limb, they need some help with doing day-to-day tasks, or someone who is been through a traumatic experience. They're everyone had like those service animals have different training
Yes.
regimens that they need to do, and different
Yep.
tasks that they need to get certified on. And then to your point, like they're constantly at work, they are always
Yeah.
at work. If their human is with them, they are working.
Yeah, and so you can't just take any dog either and put him through training. So
Right.
one of the like key things that you well know is that you have to pick the right dog. It's like saying, "Oh, I can turn any human into a soldier or a marine or, a pilot." No, you have to also put some thought into, is this a dog in the service dog world that's willing to work, that's
Yeah.
motivated to work, that will bond with this human and care about looking out for this human as the work that they do. And so that's something I've come to understand this year at a much deeper level now that I've seen that relationship
Yeah.
play out and how it's been healing some of my patients.
So can you tell us about some of the patients then, at least at a sort of an anonymous level? Like, what are
Hmm.
some of the cases that you've seen uh, get healed or get that therapy that they need through the animal?
Yeah, I can talk about general, and then I can talk about one specific that
Sure.
volunteered to share with me for some stuff I've done. He's actually going to be coming to a service dog convention on Monday and Tuesday of this week and doing a
Awesome.
talk with me. So he's somebody who's fair game. I can talk about him. But generally, with the donated service dog funding from Lazy Lab, I really tried to look out for people that do a lot for the tribe, because I think people that are healers, peer support specialists, leaders in the VFW, they hold the hope of so many people. And they are often the last people to say, I need help, or I need
Yeah.
support, or I need that. And so I know that well as a healer. And so I really thought about who are the veterans in my networks that are really doing a lot for other people. And could this gift from Lazy Lab be a blessing to them? And so I picked people that are, leaders and um, organizers and peer support specialists that I thought this could really be helpful to. And one of those people that I can talk about is not my patient. His name is Paul Whitmer, and he is Army service member. And interestingly, his dog is also named Paul. So he always signs off his emails P times two, um, because they do everything together. And
Yeah.
so Paul has become one of the ambassadors now for my organization and really understands the work that we do to kind of provide an intervention. We can talk about that later, that gets people calm in their own bodies and then moves them into that service dog bond where they then continue to do the work. So for Paul, he talked about how at first it was really hard. He got the service dog and he felt really protective of it. And he didn't like people asking questions about,
Hmm.
why do you have a service dog? What is that for? Because sometimes when you have post-traumatic stress, it's, not visible to other people. And so they wonder like, you know, are you just gaming the system, or like, is this legit? People
Yeah.
get that a lot.
Yeah.
So it was hard, it really pressed some buttons for him. But over time, he has become an ambassador in terms of the service dog world and kind of educating people by holding his center, staying calm, and telling them, what's going on with his service dog and how his service dog has really been helpful to him. And now he loves it when people walk up to him. And so it has really pushed his boundaries in the best possible way in terms of his social comfort zone. And now he's just engaging with people all the time. His dog is like really cute. And so, people come up and they initiate conversations with him. And now he's comfortable with that and really enjoys it. So he had come through a process, but it really pushed him in a good way.
Yeah, that's interesting. He was, to think that he was defensive. First, I want to start with, I meant to mention this. Love when dogs have people names. That's like one of my favorite
Yeah,
things.
me too.
Yeah. So I've got a really old miniature schnauzer who stays with my mom now, since my dad passed, and his name is Scott.
Yeah,
So yeah,
good.
yeah, love it. Love dogs
We,
with people names. So not to
any
take
animal,
anything.
right?
Yeah, any animal.
Lizard, cat. We had a cat named Bruce,
Yeah, I love it.
like, yeah,
Yeah, Bruce the cat. That's actually a cool name for a cat. Love that. Bears. I think bears naturally take on people names.
definitely.
Bruno the bear or something like that. That would be normal. Um, but I think it's cool to have him go through, like, because one of the big things like PTSD is the avoidance, right? You don't want to talk about it. You
Right,
don't want to talk about anything that could be related to why you have. So if people are asking why he
right.
has a service animal, now that's making him
Exactly.
get on that border of, you're going to make me talk about this thing I don't like to talk about, or I don't want to talk about,
Yeah.
or I don't want to acknowledge, right? So that's cool. So even in just having a service dog and having people ask about the dog is making him deal with or confront that avoidance
Yes.
tendency of PTSD. Very, very interesting. Picked up on that, like, as you were speaking. It's
Yeah.
cool. I love it. Dogs are, even if they're not trained to be a service animal, I think that having a dog can be really helpful, just
Mhm.
as a companion to give
Mhm.
you that sense of service to something else, and accountability to something else. As service members, that's important to have.
Yeah, we actually know from research, or some research done in a senior citizens home, that people live longer if they had a plant to water. So if they had a plant that would die, they live longer. And when I was, working for many years in a clinical role, to include the time I worked with Dynamite Dave, I would have patients who would routinely say, I think if my dog were not here, it would be so much easier for me to check out. That
Hmm.
having that
Yeah.
relationship actually saved many of my patients, and it gave us the space to do the work to get them to a place where they weren't having those thoughts and feelings and urges. Um, but one of my friends is Mary Cortani, who is an army. She was a dog handler in the army, and now
Okay.
she runs an organization called Operation Freedom Paws out here on the West Coast, just really high quality as well. And she shared a story with me. I did a site visit with her this year, and she said, oftentimes veterans will want, like, because she rescues dogs and then trains them, so they will want like a pit bull or a Doberman, or something that's
Yeah.
big and that tells people to stay back, like a protective dog as a defense, or sort of a walking shield. And that she will pair them up with the white ball of fluff that they never saw coming. Um, and their hearts will open and they will melt. And then
Yep.
they will, to your point, be brought into all kinds of conversations when this dog is like a magnet for people. And then in the process, work through a lot of stuff and get to a better place.
Sorry. Sorry. I'm just picturing big big military guys, gym rat types, and here they are with their Pomeranians or something. Just
Yeah. But yeah, I saw that. They had puppy yoga where they had a whole group circle of veterans and they had the dogs, and there were these guys with like bulging muscles, like
yeah,
holding like a baby on its back, like this ball of fluff. And it was just like really cool, really neat,
that's
really
awesome.
fun.
It makes you
Yeah.
tap into like a different side of yourself.
Yeah.
As a my, like, the dog is a miniature schnauzer, and I always got a lot of crap about that, even from my
Mm.
wife. And it was like, look, I first of all, that dog traveled all around the world with me, and there's nowhere that is inconvenient for him to be. It's if I had like a
Portable
giant
dog.
dog, yeah, he's
Yeah.
if I I had a giant dog, where am I going to put him? Where am I going to take him? It's just, now it becomes stressful. It becomes a little more of a hassle, but
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, very, very cool. I love the service dog aspect of therapy, and it marries very well with what we do at Lazy Lab with the outdoor therapy, because often
Yeah.
our pets can come, our dogs can come with us outdoors. They love to be out there as well. And we did an episode of the podcast a couple months ago about hunting dogs, and how dogs can be our companions out in the field, which was
Hmm.
really fun as well. So I want to pivot a little bit to some of the other stuff you have going on. So you have a book that you wrote called Warrior, and it's how to support those who protect us. Nailed it.
Yes.
And you have a new edition, or an updated copy, um, that you released in May, which goes into some new topics, like another couple chapters where you're talking about like the past year and COVID and
Yeah.
that kind of stuff. What did you find, or what are some of the maybe high level talking points on that, without giving too much away, because people should go buy the book. But what are the high
Yeah.
level talking points for that?
Well, people say don't write a book, for more than one audience. But I did write this book for more than one audience, basically working with warriors and first responders for so many years. I wanted to collect all of the insights they've shared with me and share that back to them
Sure.
so that they can understand from their brothers and sisters, but that people who love them can understand, what the nature of the struggle is, and people who are making decisions, policymakers and healers like myself, can really understand the pain. So, big picture, I think there's often a story behind the story, and you don't learn that story if you don't build the trust.
Yeah.
And so this book is very personal to me because it's my personal journey of really thinking about how I practice as a psychologist and really changing that, evolving and becoming something different than what I was trained to be.
Sure.
Transitioning from becoming a doctor into being a doc, and what that means and how that plays out. And then all of the insights that I've learned about stuff we don't talk about enough, the survivor guilt, the moral injury, the shame that is actually more related to suicide than depression for many of my patients, conversations about firearms, problems in marriage, grief and loss after losing people you love to suicide. All of that is really what Warrior is about. It's the story behind the story that most people never hear when they come in with a prescribed, treatment plan, and we're going to focus on the horrors of war and the things you saw and did in combat. And it totally misses the bigger picture of so many things
Yeah.
that people really struggle with that are really linked to suicide and other negative outcomes.
Yeah, what Matt, and thank you. Yeah, I know last time we spoke, we talked about Warrior, and we talked about your journey of acceptance into this tribe and community of warriors, and how misrepresented we are in the opinion of those who are outside of that tribe, and it makes us not want to approach, or makes us hesitant, resistant to let others in, and we become very defensive. And I'm just drawing parallels to the service dog now in the same way. It's
Mm.
like that dog becomes part of our inner circle. They get our trust, and we become defensive of the dog as well. So it's very interesting to think about it, with new context, with a new lens. Um, but it's a very good representation of telling that story, and that's what I think is important for people to capture. Is it's hard. I work in corporate America now, and there's a misconception about veterans, and who are we? Like, what, has everyone served? You've all been shot at. You've all done these horrible things and whatever, and it makes it tough to relate to people sometimes at work, because they had this feeling of, or they had this notion that that's what I was, and here I am
Mhm.
in the banking industry. You know, it just it's interesting. So I need to share that book with my colleagues. That's what I need to
Yeah,
do.
please do. And the
Yeah.
new one also has a lot of new content. I put in a lot of new exercises about building trust with a provider. What does it look like to disclose and take a little risk in what you share, but not unzip yourself? You know, how do you do that in a way that feels safe to you? So there's some really practical stuff about that. And then I did some work around COVID. I've done, gosh, it's been over 200 media engagements since COVID started. And
Wow.
always the theme is the trauma that I've learned so deeply with the warfighter and first responder population is trauma that other people are now facing. And there's so many parallels. And now trauma is a human universal. And so I put in a whole new section in my expanded edition about how trauma plays out for all of us in this really bizarre year and a half plus of trauma.
Yeah, it's been a weird it's been a
Yeah.
weird year for sure. And it makes, I'm just going to adjust my microphone here cuz I feel like I'm getting further away from it. But it makes you think like how it's hard to go back. I'm having a hard time articulating what I want to say, but it's hard to go back and recapture like what it was like before. Um, and it's definitely pushed us to be more resilient in our overcoming of adversity that every single person has had to face in some way, shape, or form that maybe they haven't before. I what I've noticed, and maybe this is not relevant, maybe it is, but what I've noticed is I've seen a spike in fear, like personal fear. Um, just in general, people are very like unsure of their future and fearful of what
Mhm.
could happen more so than I've ever noticed people being. And
Yeah.
that's what stands out to me about the past year is
That's yeah, absolutely relevant. Because really, you know, one of the things that trauma does, right, is it moves us from a place of default approach or sort of hope about the future, moving towards things, to default distrust
yeah,
and default defensiveness. So I think what Americans across the country are now experiencing is something that warriors and people who have deployed, even not to combat zones, but to dangerous occupations, right, and seen training accidents happen and such, is realizing that the world isn't predictable or controllable or always safe, you know, and sort of having
yeah,
to reckon with those really difficult questions and think about what does this mean for me and how I want to live, what I can protect, what I can't protect against, and what do I want to do with the time I'm given that we all live in this chaotic world that has X factors. I mean, in California, we had like a week here that was like the apocalypse where
yeah,
we were couldn't go and breathe air outside because it was so toxic from these terrible wildfires and
yeah.
people lost their homes and it was just stacked upon trauma for so many of us this year that a very very bizarre year, hopefully the most weird year we will ever have in our lifetimes,
Fingers
but I
crossed.
don't know. Yeah, I don't know.
How have veterans, just in your experience, how have veterans handled COVID? I'd be interested to know, like from a larger sampling size, like how
Yeah,
have veterans dealt with this?
one of two ways, in extremes in my observation. So, either I had a group of veterans who said, "Oh, I'm comfortable with isolation. I can do isolation. It's actually my natural state, and I know who my friends are. I know who my tribe is, and I know how strong I am, and like I can do this. I can get through this." Right?
Yeah.
But there were other people for whom this year echoed past traumas.
Mm.
So, just to give a few examples. Um, the state of mind of living with this invisible threat where you have to be chronically hypervigilant
Yeah.
24/7 and somebody you love could get this invisible deadly virus, potentially deadly virus, and like you could lose someone and be cut off in your grief, very similar to past traumas that many of the veteran people in my network have experienced.
Right.
And so that survivor guilt, that grief, that fear, that dread, the hypervigilance, all of that echoed past traumas. And then the isolation for some was deadly. So kind of one of two directions, but a uniquely challenging year for everyone, regardless.
Yeah. Yeah. It's I appreciate it. Thank you for shedding some light on that. I wonder, it's like we were very used to uncertainty, but I can see where isolation, when magnified by forced isolation, it's so you veterans, like, a lot of times will isolate, they self-isolate because they feel detached from their tribe, especially like when you get out of the
Yeah.
military. It's like the military keeps churning on, and here you are now left behind is the feeling you have. And so you feel kind of on your own island, um, looking for Wilson. So it's tough. Castaway reference, everyone. It's tough to imagine that folks going through that, especially if you're like getting out of the military during the pandemic, during these
Mhm.
like during uncertain times for the economy, for the job market, for world health, for just everything. And then you're going to get out
Yeah.
and be like forcefully isolated. Um,
Mhm.
scary. Yeah, I can imagine that having an impact on your ability to be resilient, through, just in normal circumstances.
Yeah, and everybody who came into a new job, think about all those people that came into the workforce and they didn't really have established relationships with colleagues. And,
Right.
there was no normal before it was all just blown apart. And people were told to go home and work from there and, extremely stressful. And
Mm,
then so many people, went through the learning curve of figuring out work from home all at once. And that was a
yeah.
big mess, because it's really hard. Like I've been doing it for 5 or 6 years now. It's been hard to, kind of separate work from home and family and, with everybody trying to figure that out all at once
Right.
and sending emails from different time zones all at once, like the whole culture of work and setting, any line between yourself and your work was really hard for a lot of people this year, just regardless. So,
It's more of a vet pivot type question. But do you think there's a positive in the work culture? Is it a positive shift, or is it a maybe a not so good shift, and more so along the lines of, I'd be interested just to hear your perspective on that.
well, it's interesting. It depends on the company culture.
Yeah.
So some companies are handling it really well by having these open conversations that are transparent and fair and balanced. And, when people have really stepped up, they're rewarding that appropriately, because a lot of companies have done really well this year. People are working really hard, sometimes turning all of their anxiety into like work. But there are other companies that are not handling it well. I've seen that play out too,
Yeah.
where people are being forced to come back and they're in fear and they're feeling like it's not equitable, who's coming back and who's not. That's kind of played out this year as well. So I think it really depends. There are some things that are really interesting, socially, because all of these companies that said, no, no, we can't do remote work, you're not allowed to,
Right.
for many years. It was like, that would never work. They were forced to, and then now we've tested that, and for some of them, they actually turned a much greater profit. Um, so what does that mean for the world of work? But we've also learned that working from home was not a Shangri-La. You know,
No.
with kids at home
Yeah.
and constant, disruptions and doing everything under one roof all the time. This is a lazy lab thing. This is where I think getting out in the woods is the antidote to being trapped at home. And
Yeah.
so organizations that are doing hunts and like nature and like sense of awe, really, really critical right now for mental wellness.
I couldn't agree more. I found myself searching for, um, some sort of activity. I mean, the I
Yeah.
do the lazy lab and I go on the hunts, but looking for something that is, both mentally and physically, stimulating / occupying, where it's like a singular task, a singular thing that takes my mind off of everything else, and I have to focus on this one thing
Mhm.
to get that. That in itself is a rest. Like, you're never going to shut it off, I don't think. But
Yeah.
like, if you could find that one thing to focus on. So for me, it's been jujitsu, which I've been doing since March. And
Okay.
that has become like my, like an hour, 4 times a week. I just, it's the only thing I'm focused on is not getting choked out, it's, but in that I'm getting exercise. I'm getting
Yeah.
endorphins from the exercise. I'm getting mental stimulation because I'm learning a new skill. I'm getting problem solving, put in front of me where I'm constantly trying to solve this puzzle of how do I beat my opponent, and it's the only, I find myself leaving there after an hour and I'm like, wow, that I feel great. I feel totally 1 hour and I feel mentally rejuvenated, and
Yeah.
it's a very cool thing. And I see that same reaction, when I'm leaving the woods, or, I see it in our heroes when they're leaving an event at Lazy Lab, and they're like different from the day they showed up to the day that they leave.
Yeah.
It could be 2 days, could be 3 days, totally different demeanor. They just
Mm.
they have a different look about them. They have some fellowship, and we get to know and trust one another. And there's talk. It's just it's very, very inspiring to be part of an organization that pulls that out of people.
Yeah. I had the same experience you had with martial arts. I haven't done it for a while, but I did some last year, Kyokushin karate, and have done a little bit of different styles in the past. I remember doing Krav Maga for a little while, and
Yeah,
that was a tough kind of, you have to stay on your toes. But I remember coming out of those classes and just feeling proud that I did it,
yeah,
proud that I hung in there. I was often the only woman in the class, and it was just totally absorbing. Like you said, like, it's very motivating. If, like, you let your guard down, you're gonna get hurt.
yeah.
And so it right?
It's
So there's an
100%.
urgency about that, and it totally absorbs your senses in a different way. Just like, being out in nature and having to, like, hunt, you're tuning yourself to a different rhythm and different
Yeah,
sensory experience.
yeah, and on top of that, like, being outdoors, the other feather in its cap, if you will, is that you're in the glory of what God has built. It is an amazing thing to be in the landscape and feel small. Puts things
Mhm.
in perspective, and it gives you this different lens to see the world through, which then, you know, reduces your problems a little bit. Just due to the vastness of nature, right? It reduces what you think is such a big deal within your four walls. And you're sitting there thinking, oh, how am I going to get out of this hole that I'm in? Or how am I going to like bring myself up from feeling down? And then you get out there and you're like, just you sit there and probably like an hour, maybe an hour and a half, depends on the person, but it just, you have like sort of that nervous like banter back and forth with each other, and then it just kind of gets quiet, but not in a weird way. It just gets quiet because like, what else can you say? Like, look what's out in front of you, and then you feel at peace. It's that moment of calm that falls over you. It's very, very cool.
So you could do an episode entitled "How Nature Can Be Your Shrink."
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
you've just made that argument, right? So people
Yeah.
talk about what is a head shrink, right? And it's the concept of, and I never really liked that term, but the concept of someone who takes the problems that you have that you can't put into words and makes them surmountable, or just feel like things that can be managed and overcome.
Yeah.
And part of that I know from studying kind of the psychology of happiness is that sense of awe of being small, of realizing that we're kind of in some sense like all grasshoppers.
Yeah.
All the problems we have, they feel really big to us, especially in four walls. But that can be a help. At the same time, some people really do have some serious challenges, and I don't want to minimize that.
Sure.
And those
Yeah.
challenges, need different attention than we've been giving them.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, there are some things that you need to seek help and talk to a professional and get that taken care of, and supplemental to that, like finding an activity that gets you in a safe environment where you can feel at ease, can be beneficial, to supplement getting the help that you should seek for yourself.
Yeah, well, one of
To heal.
the big things I've learned actually this year is that post-traumatic stress is an injury and it's not invisible. We talk about PTS as an invisible injury. With the right brain scan, it can actually be visualized
Wow.
and it can be treated. And so in the past year, in addition to writing my book Warrior, which is, to me, it's the insight portion of what people need to know to get clear of the fog of war. One of the other things I've been working on is this very innovative endeavor around getting a treatment called stellate ganglion block to be available across the country. So in the last 12 months, my organization, Stella, has put over 20 clinics across the US and 2 in Australia.
Wow.
Yeah, so we're growing, every single month, adding sites and locations, doing this really interesting treatment that treats the biological injury of trauma very efficiently for most of the people that we take care of.
I feel like we did talk about this on Vet Pivot. If I'm not like, it's starting to hit me. I think I had a block, a different kind of block. We talked about it earlier today. But what is for the layperson? What is the Stella ganglion block? Did I get that right?
Stella is the organization. Stellate ganglion block is the
Stellate.
procedure. So, yeah. So it's an injection into a cluster of nerves in the neck that can help calm people down. And so it treats specific symptoms of trauma, like difficulty sleeping and that hypervigilance,
Okay.
the flooding of anxiety or irritability, the startle response when people walk up behind you, and difficulties concentrating are the target symptoms. And it works like 80% of the time when we give the first treatment. And then we treat people the next day, and it brings us up to about a 90% success rate in
Wow.
terms of a dramatic reduction in those symptoms I just named with a shot. And it's an anesthetic medication. And this is considered a very safe and routine procedure by people that have done a lot of these. So it's not a new or fringy thing. It just, most people still have not heard about it. So I'm always keen to share so that veterans and first responders and healers, peer support can know about this new treatment option.
What's the reason? I have so many questions. What's the reason why it's lesser known?
I think because most of it has been developed in military hospitals and bases. So, with the exception of Dr. Lipov, who is operating out of Chicago, and he's the first person to publish a case study on this, it's basically been advanced in places that are like Area 51 to most Americans. So,
Hmm.
Fort Bragg has been doing it for many years. The Special Forces community, this is a go-to treatment for trauma. They do it at Walter Reed and Landstuhl Tripler Army Medical Center. But these are not places that most Americans have an intersection with. And
Right.
so even in the VA system, it's, 10 or 12 VAs offered. And right now it's a bit of an underground railroad. If you just happen
Yeah.
to know about it or get a referral, maybe you can get it. And Stella wanted to make this available and visible across the country for not just veterans, but all Americans who are suffering from trauma.
Wow. It's interesting. So, how often would they need to go back for like subsequent injections?
Yep. So it depends. And to your point, you talked about the importance of going in for therapy and, kind of having that process as well as doing outdoor activities. And it really depends on what people do with the opportunity. So stellate ganglion block can get people calm in their own bodies. And then they're able to take in new insights and kind of change the underlying thinking and patterns that are driving their lifestyle.
Yeah.
And so I've had a number of people that have done the work by doing therapy right after the stellate ganglion block. And some of them were my patients. When I first started doing this, I was following them for months and months. And I found that the therapy got an entirely new traction when they were in the room with me and able to be calm and listen and, hear the
Right.
insights. It was just totally different. So one of the veterans that we treated gave me a great analogy the other day. His name is Arturo Weber. And he said SGB is like the primer before the paint.
Okay, that's good. I like that. So
Yeah.
you're doing it. It's complementary, right, to the therapy,
Yeah.
right? So
Yeah.
that makes a lot of sense. And then on top of that, you're probably getting, you know, the calmness of the patient versus as well as the, the more routine sleep habits,
Yes.
the
Exactly.
less defensive, um, state of their conscience, right? Consciousness. They're not as high alert,
Yep.
and yeah, that makes sense.
That's
Okay,
exactly right. If you fix the sleep and you get people calm and they're in the room with you, it's totally a different equation.
yeah, you have a
I
different
saw some
person,
data from Mission 22, a partner of ours. They have these Garmin watches where they can track sleep and stuff. It was
right?
really interesting. After the SGB for this guy that we just took a look at, his REM sleep improved by 40%.
No kidding. Wow.
Yeah, so
It's
you
huge,
should
by the way. Like
yeah,
sleep is huge, and
huge.
for folks that aren't aware, like that makes a one of the hardest things I think about PTS is that impact that it has on your sleep and your ability to
Definitely.
get restful sleep because it changes who you are. I think anybody can associate like a bad night of sleep and how you feel the next day. Well, just
Yep.
extrapolate that now by like, anywhere from 5 to every night of the
Yeah,
week.
right.
And that's what someone with PTS is typically dealing with. Um, so if you can solve that equation, very, very helpful, obviously.
Yeah,
Um, in just getting a new person because they're refreshed that it's your body's time to heal to include your brain. That's
yeah,
when you're
yep.
sleeping. That's awesome. So the Stella program, um, what is the cost to the veteran? I think I know the answer. But what's the cost of the veteran to get those injections?
Well, right now, insurance companies don't cover it. So it's kind of like LASIK. It can change your life, but it's not reimbursable by insurance.
Right.
So about the same cost as LASIK. It starts at 29.50, but then Stella gives a 20% discount for any veteran or first responder.
Okay.
Absolutely. And then we give some other discounts when we can, like if somebody has to travel, that would be another thing we could do to help them with a discount there. And we also have a partnership with a company called Care Credit because a lot of people they can't afford a big chunk up front. Maybe somebody's got 100% service connected and they're getting every month you know, what would be needed to cover the
Yeah.
procedure. But rather than giving a whole month up every year, and they don't have to get the procedure every year. Some people get it and it goes for years and years. What they can do is just pay it out over time in a like reasonable amount. And that way we can always say, yes, we have, something that can make this workable for you. But in the meantime, I'm also working with the political um, team at Congressman Scott Perry's office and other congressmen of both sides of the aisle, including my Democratic congressman, Mark DeSaulnier, for the Treat PTSD Act,
Yeah.
which simply says we want this to be available as an option for veterans who want it across the VA. You don't have to have it. It's not like we're going to line people up and say, we're giving you this treatment, you have no choice. But if you want it, it's available as a covered treatment across the VA. And that just got endorsed by the VFW.
Oh,
So,
awesome.
yeah, major momentum with that. And so they kind of bring me into talks with other organizations like AMVETS, to endorse it. Green Beret Foundation has endorsed it. Mission 22 has endorsed it. So a lot of good momentum there, but these things take a long time. And so it's just got to be
Sure.
a steady push.
Are there any negative side effects, any negative implications, things that could happen that the veteran needs to be aware of?
Yeah, it's a good question. And the kind of best analogy I have for how to answer that is that a similar analogous procedure is when women get epidurals in childbirth.
Sure.
And so it's like safe and routine enough that it happens every day, all the time. With stellate ganglion block, it's actually coming out of the pain tradition. So this is not a new procedure. It's been around since 1925, and it's used for things like phantom limb pain when
Okay.
someone has lost a limb and they're still getting like pain in the place where the limb was, or adult shingles, which is a very painful thing. So we have the advantage of like 100 years of people in the pain procedure field
Yeah.
doing this, routinely. So it's kind of like saying, are there any side effects to an epidural? And the response I would say is not if you have a qualified physician that places the injection correctly based on their training. So the side effects you might see would be if said to somebody who has, no training, like if you put me in an F-18 fighter jet and you said, fly it, I would do a lot of damage, right?
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
to a trained and qualified provider that flies, that's qualified and certified for that aircraft, so it's
Yeah. So if
considered a
it's
very safe and
routine,
routine.
right? It's a routine
Yeah.
procedure to have done, no different than an epidural. So where there are risks obviously involved, and there is insurance that needs to be carried by the practitioner. I would imagine
Yep.
that's going to give you that injection. Should the worst possible thing imaginable happen, that's no different than than any other
Yeah.
medical procedure. There's always going to be risk involved.
Always
Um,
risk anytime there's an
yeah.
intervention, right? But no long-term side effects have
Okay.
ever been discovered from this, as long as it's done competently by a qualified person who places the injection correctly.
Yeah.
And that's
And
actually why I really want Stella to take the lead on this, because they are vetted and trained by Dr. Lipoff personally. So, he looks at who has done this a number of times, and then he, brings them up to speed in terms of the protocol we use for trauma.
yeah.
And so it's not, all over the map in terms of what they're doing and how they're doing it.
No, they definitely need to, we need to keep pushing then, obviously, to make this an option for treatment for veterans. It's one of the things that, like, probably aggravates me the most. Like, when people are like, "I don't understand, I had a good experience with the VA," like, why does everyone talk so bad about them? I don't know that it's actually going to the VA that's the problem. It's their policy based on treatment of things, it's and how long it takes for that to be accepted, and there's some other things, but it's more along the way that they handle alternative therapies or medicines and treatments, and being flexible to provide the best care to the veteran versus being archaic and kind of like, you will do it this way. It's like, it it doesn't make sense to me to throw a bunch of pills at people. I don't see the value or the merit in that, and I don't know that there's any documented uh, research that shows that that's the best way to treat mental trauma. Like, I just don't get that,
And a
and
lot of people don't want to be on medications, so if
no.
you gave them the option of something that's, likely to work within 1 or 2 visits, that is non-psychoactive, they're not injecting anything that's going to make you pop positive on a drug test with the stellate
Right.
ganglion block, people would choose it. But here's the thing I just realized as you were saying that, Matt, never really put this together. There's like a catch 22 in what's going on, I think, right there. Okay, so we talked about how people are often critical of the VA, and that is definitely true. The VA gets slammed in the press by people all the time. And so as a result, the VA tends to be very defensive and risk averse, right?
Yeah.
Because they're
Yep.
continually getting attacked, right? And when you are risk averse and in that defensive posture, you're not open. It's like institutional trauma, right?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
the thing that would invite an organization to innovate and say, we don't know everything, but this one isn't a new procedure. And if veterans want it, we want to make it possible, would be receiving a fair hearing, right? And would be an organization that doesn't feel like they've been attacked. And
Yeah.
so I think it's a real catch 22 is like the VA is probably going to have a hard time really shifting outside of a law being passed to say, we want you to make this available.
Yep.
And then the VA can act on that and say, we are so, so requested by Congress and we will make that happen. But otherwise, I think that has to do with the pace of innovation being accepted, is that they're always being kind of attacked.
Yeah, look, government agencies are not very good at innovation as it is, right? Which is why they outsource to, corporate America to provide that innovation. We see it like growing up in the Air Force, saw it all the time,
Yeah.
right? We're not building fighter jets. We trust Lockheed to build those, or Northrop, or so, we're
Yeah.
always outsourcing innovation in the government. Where you see the VA, I think, kind of fall short is that if they were to outsource innovation, like they would probably get those better reviews. But to your point, it's like that catch 22 is if I'm, running the VA, I'm like, nah, it's my job on the line. It's my neck on the line. Like,
Yeah.
I don't know what I want to do, so there's like the self-preservation thing. At the end of the day, my viewpoint on it would be, well, you know, you're in a service industry and you're there to
Yep.
serve your patients, and there is
Yep.
no larger patient base than the Department of Veteran Affairs. Like that's a huge patient database of like,
The
you should
biggest
be,
one, right?
yeah, you should be
Yeah.
willing to innovate because you have all these data points that you can draw from. And imagine the research that could happen in the VA in a good way, right? The amount of
Right.
clinical research that could benefit everybody. It's like, I don't know. I'm on
But
a
they won't
soapbox
move
now.
unless no, the will of the people is to push them to innovate, right? And then they
Yeah.
can say, okay, what I would love to see, and I think is possible now after this horrible year and a half we've had, is that there's will to innovate around trauma. So stuff that
Yeah.
people are like, oh, I don't know, that sounds like kind of extreme, like get a shot in the neck. Now people are going, wow, that really helps somebody I know. Let's innovate like our lives depend on it, right?
Yep.
I would love to see the VA be a hero and like step into that and just be open about that. Like, based on this research, we're going to offer it. And like, some of the VAs have started to do that. Long Beach VA is actually a site for innovation around stellate ganglion block.
Okay.
They have put out some videos on this. So it's not everywhere. It's just how do we create the culture where the VA can step into innovation without fear?
Yeah. In the meantime, what nonprofit's going to step up to pay for these for veterans that can't afford them? That's the other
It's
thing
been
we need.
hard since
Yeah.
COVID. We used to have funding, and I could say, well, some of the service dog organizations actually that we work with have been doing that because
Okay.
the quality of the bond between the canine and the human that they're working with is so much better when that person is calm and available for the bonding process. So some of the orgs we work with, like Operation Freedom Paws, has sent us 20 people recently to they get the stellate ganglion block and then they do all the service dog work and training after that.
Yeah.
And it's been game changing. So please, if
I'm wondering.
anybody wants to fund those, reach out.
Yeah, I'm wondering. I need maybe Mitchson and I need to have a conversation about another channel of continued support from the Lazy Lab side of things. Maybe that's an option. Not sure. Not sure where he'll fall on that or how closely it ties to getting people outdoors and and do so. But to
Yeah.
me, I feel like you can make the connection, right? We're dealing with significantly wounded veterans and service members, and let's do our very best by them. I want to be conscious of time. give you opportunity to plug the stuff you have going on. But I want to say thank you first and foremost for coming on and having a conversation with me. It's always a
Anytime.
pleasure. It was a pleasure last time. It's a pleasure this time. And kudos to you for all the great work you're doing for the men and women that serve this country.
Thank you, Matt. I'll tell you one more little interesting thing, and then maybe where people can find me, if that's okay.
Sure.
So the stellate ganglion block has actually been used to treat post-traumatic stress in dogs. And to me, the fact that you can treat a canine that has post-traumatic stress, whether it's from, being in the war or some other, horrible thing that dog has gone through, is proof positive that post-traumatic stress is an injury and it's treatable, right? Because if you can get that dog from one state of mind to a calm, open, relaxed state of mind,
yeah,
it's amazing. So, yeah, the thing that I'm really excited about right now is the second edition of my book, Warrior: How to Support Those Who Protect Us. I will tell you, I'm not allowed to solicit reviews, so I'm not going to solicit reviews for my second edition, but I will just say that when I stopped my first edition from being distributed and really pivoted to my second edition, I lost 67 5-star reviews in a single day. And I was told they'd be transferred over, but that did not happen. And I'm told
oh,
now that those are separate product lines. So that is devastating to me as an author. So I would love it if people would read my second edition and do as you feel called to do in terms of whatever support you want to give for my work is much appreciated. So that's out now. And I have a new website that really kind of just features in a more simple way. My old one was getting too complicated. So it's just my speaking and some exciting stuff I have coming forward with a friend named Jennifer. And that is drshaunaspringer.com. And then I want to make sure to tell people where to find out about stellate ganglion block, which is stellacenter.com. So if you go there, you'll find a wealth of information. We're about to release a whole training series that I wrote and narrated for providers to learn more about it. And we've got patient videos and testimonials. And actually, there was a documentary series that was about 3 of my patients who received stellate ganglion block, and it just won 7 Emmy Awards.
no
So
kidding. Wow. Good for
yeah,
you.
it was another good thing that happened this year and a very
Yeah.
interesting year. So
And the name of that one was, again, it was for
the
the
video
folks
series,
the folks that wanted to learn more about Stella, they can go to, what was the name of that website again? Because I missed it. I just want to make sure that
yeah,
I have it written down.
stellacenter.com is the
stellacenter.com.
Stella website. And drshaunaspringer.com is my personal website. And then my book is Warrior: How to Support Those Who Protect Us on Amazon. And I've been doing some work with my friend Jennifer Tracy at redefineyourmission.com, which is going to allow us to get our books out with a series of videos and worksheets and all kinds of support for people that want to go through that in a guided way.
Awesome. Awesome. You're so busy. Thank you for taking an hour of your day
Oh, it's fun.
and spending it with me on the Lazy Lab
Anytime.
podcast. I appreciate that. So, folks, this was Doc Shauna Springer. Obviously, a ton of information. So, if you need to listen to it a couple times, have your pen and paper ready so you can write down notes. And of course, the show notes will be in the description of the video below. So you can just go check that out for all the links and everything. I'll throw them in there. I want to say thank you so much to the audience. Thank you to Ubura Coffee Roasters. And also, most importantly, thanks to God for giving us a chance to get together and have this conversation for the Lazy Lab podcast. Very, very, very fun, informative, and push your local politician to push this SGB treatment so that we can get this thing over to the VA and they can start offering that as something they can provide to veterans. I mean, at the end of the day, that's going to be the way we make the change, right? So make your local politician do their job. With that said, everyone, please stay safe. And until next time, God bless.